Architect a Life of Freedom is a transformational short story and coherence journey for anyone who did everything right, built the career, carried the responsibilities, held everyone together, yet still feels the quiet ache that something essential is missing. From the outside, life looks successful. On the inside, it no longer feels like yours. You can't name exactly what's wrong. Only that the old way of living is too tight, too loud, too performative to hold what's true. Then a dream changes everything. For Sarah, it isn't just a dream, it's an ignition. In the dream, she feels the spark within her come alive, like a dormant truth suddenly remembering itself, a deep yearning she can't shake loose. She sees a life that isn't built on approval, productivity, or pleasing, yet it feels unmistakably real. When she wakes, she can't unfeel it. The vision begins pulling her forward, not through force, but through resonance. Something in her heart recognizes the path before her mind can justify it. Sarah realizes her approval-winning ego identity has been guiding her down someone else's life. And then the bridge appears. Breath. In this story, you'll walk beside Sarah in her hero's journey at a threshold moment, the in-between space where the old life no longer fits and the new life is not yet formed. Instead of pushing harder, she begins to listen. Instead of fixing herself, she starts dissolving what was never truly hers: culturally formed boxes, inherited expectations, survival roles, and the unseen belief structures that quietly drive behavior and fray her nervous system. Through the lens of quantum alchemy principles, the story reveals why freedom isn't a destination, it's a frequency. You'll see how the mind repeats old scripts even when the heart is ready to move on, why overgiving and people-pleasing can masquerade as love while functioning like self-abandonment, how overthinking is often the nervous system trying to stay safe. You'll learn why your body keeps the receipts, storing unresolved emotion and unspoken truths as tension, fatigue, and the feeling that something real is waiting underneath the noise. Breath is presented not as a trend, but as a return, an immediate access point to coherence. As Sarah practices coming back to herself, her inner world begins to reorganize. The heart clarifies desire. The mind loosens its grip on old stories. The body reveals what's true in real time. With each conscious breath, she moves from reacting to consciously creating, from running old patterns to living by vision, from self-doubt to deep trust in inner knowing. She begins to architect from the inside out, so the external life can finally match the internal truth. Inside this story, you'll discover why freedom isn't a destination, it's a frequency you can cultivate. How to recognize the invisible programs shaping your choices. What it feels like when your nervous system shifts from survival into calm clarity. How to listen to your body without fear, shame, or drama. Why breath reunites mind, body, and heart into one clear yes. A simple framework you'll remember. Heart, desire, plus mind, story, plus body, truth, are unified through breath, bridge. Architect a Life of Freedom is for high-capacity women and men who can lead, build, and endure, but know something deeper is calling. It's for anyone tired of coping and carrying others' obligations and burdens, ready to create without abandoning themselves. Because the life you want isn't built in one leap, it's built in aligned choices, guided by the spark that finally says, "This is who I am." Architect a Life of Freedom by Julie G. Valentin, February 2026. Dedication. To everyone who has felt the quiet ache of a life that looks right on the outside but doesn't feel true on the inside. For those standing at the threshold, tired of repeating old patterns, ready to live by vision. May this book help you dissolve what isn't yours, reclaim what is, and create from the deep inner knowing that has been waiting beneath it all. Remember who you are and claim the courage to step beyond the box into the life your soul is here to live. From Survival to Freedom, a Nervous System. Reset Story. Table of Contents. The Awakening, 3, Part 1. The nervous system. 8. Chapter 1. The tremor beneath everything 8. Chapter 2. When safety was a lie 16. Part 2. The 0.21. Chapter 3. The Great Unraveling 21. Chapter 4. The Void Between Lives 26. Part 3. Coherence 30. Chapter 5. Learning the Language of Alignment 30. Chapter 6. The Integration 36. Chapter 7. The Vision That Feels Safe 40. Part 4. Frequency and Congruence 56. Chapter 8. The Signal You Broadcast 56. Chapter 9. The Battle to Hold It 65. Part 5. The Return 68. Chapter 10. The Life She Architected 68. Chapter 11. Completing the Story 71. The Architect. Blueprint Seshdasmitseshi. Step 1. Regulate the Nervous System 76. Step 2. Find 0.76. Step 3. Build Coherence 77. Step 4. Stabilize your frequency 77. Step 5. Live in Congruence 78. Step 6. Claim your sovereignty 78. Epilogue, The Invitation 79. The Soul Truth. You need to hear 80. The question your soul is asking 81. What your body already knows 82. What happens next 83. A note from the author 85. The Awakening. The morning light filtered through sheer curtains, casting golden patterns across the hardwood floor. Sarah, though it felt like a different Sarah, opened her eyes without the familiar clench of dread. No racing heart, no mental checklist screaming obligations before her feet touched the ground. She was 35, and for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, she was free. The studio called to her, not with the demanding voice of should, but with the magnetic pull of her heart's pure desire. She could feel the clay beneath her fingers before she even walked through the doorway. Her hands, these hands that had typed endless reports, signed documents she didn't believe in, gripped steering wheels in white-knuckled commutes. These hands were ready to create. The phone sat silent on the counter. No one owned Sarah's time today. No one could. She made coffee slowly, feeling each step, the rhythm of grinding beans, the bloom of hot water when it meets the grounds. The first sip was prayer, the second was homecoming, the kind of simple pleasure that survival mode had taught her to rush past. This afternoon, she'd meet with the women's circle she'd been dreaming of facilitating for years, the ones who gathered not because they had to network or perform, but because something in them recognized the same frequency in her. They came to remember who they were beneath the roles, the masks, the inherited stories of what a woman's life should look like. This was her life now. This was the life, the one she'd architected from the rubble of who she'd been told to be. She stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of rose and amber. And for just a moment, barely a breath, she felt the faintest tremor of doubt, a whisper, "Is this real?" Because she had done the work. She had walked through the fire of her own unraveling and emerged sovereign. She had learned to hold the frequency and achieve coherence within, and the universe, in its infinite wisdom and perfect timing, had responded. This was real. This was hers. This was impossible. Then it was gone as Sarah jolted awake to the blaring alarm, heart hammering, sheets twisted around her legs like restraints. The alarm shrieked. 5:55 a.m. Oh crap. She must have slapped the alarm off at 5:30. 20 minutes until she had to be in the car, 60 minutes until she had to be in the office, exactly on time because Karen from HR had started tracking her clock-ins with the kind of passive-aggressive precision that made Sarah's shoulders live somewhere up near her ears. The dream. God, the dream. It had felt so real. Her studio. The women's circle. The silence that wasn't loneliness, but spaciousness. The feeling of having hands that create rather than just execute tasks. The coffee was a ceremony instead of fuel. She sat on the edge of the bed, head in her hands, fighting the urge to cry until she could no longer and sobbed uncontrollably. 35 years old, a decade into a career she'd never actually chosen, but had somehow defaulted into it because it was stable and impressive and made her parents proud. A mortgage on a house she'd bought because that's what successful people do at this age. Even though she lived alone in it, she sometimes walked from room to room, feeling like a stranger in a museum of someone else's life. A body that hurt all the time, jaw clenched, stomach in knots, chronic headaches, the doctor called stress-related, before writing another prescription she was afraid to take. Relationships that repeated the same exhausting pattern. She gave and gave and gave until she was hollow, then resented everyone for taking what she'd offered, then felt guilty for the resentment, then gave more to atone for the guilt. The dream had shown her another life, her life, the real one, and she was nowhere near it. Sarah stood now on autopilot, skipped her shower due to the crying jag eating into her limited time. Damn Karen, she thought. No time for myself. Coffee in a to-go mug, an outfit that signaled professional while slowly strangling her spirit. Keys, purse. One last glance into the mirror to see if she had successfully composed herself. Door locked. Car, traffic. Another day. That dream. It haunted her through her commute, the morning meetings, through the lunch she ate at her desk while answering emails, through the performance review where her manager praised her dedication. Translation, she never said no, while somehow making it clear there was no promotion coming. Translation, why pay more for what you're already giving for free? By 3 p.m., sitting in a conference room listening to people debate solutions to problems that wouldn't exist if anyone dared to ask better questions, Sarah felt something crack open, like a light out of the pure darkness. It wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. The life in the dream, somehow she knew it wasn't fantasy. She could feel the truth of it in the depths of her soul. It was a memory, not of the past, but of the future. A future self, reaching back through time, showing her what was possible, what was waiting. But between here and there was a journey she didn't know how to begin. Between here and there was everything she'd have to unlearn, release, and become. Between here and there was the work. And sitting in that conference room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, she made a decision that would change everything. She was ready to live life differently, no matter what it took. That dream, the peace and confidence, the inner knowing the Sarah in the dream held was contagious, and it kept calling her until her heart ached. Not ready to have it all figured out, not ready to quit her job tomorrow or blow up her life in some dramatic scene. Ready to start, ready to learn what it meant to architect a life that was actually hers. Ready to discover why the dream had felt so much more real than the reality she was living. That night, she didn't know she was about to step onto a path that would require her to face every fear she'd been running from. She didn't know she'd have to dismantle the very foundation of her identity before she could build something true. She didn't know it would take 10 years from 35 to 45 to master the skills of inner freedom, or that on her 45th birthday, she'd wake up to discover that everything had shifted overnight, and she was somehow back at 35, but this time living the life instead of just dreaming it. She didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was this: something inside her had said yes, and that was enough to begin. Part 1. The Nervous System. Chapter 1. The Tremor Beneath Everything. The workshop was called Breathwork for Beginners, and Sarah had signed up on impulse after scrolling past it 3 times in a week. The universe, it seemed, has a way of putting things in your path until you finally pay attention. She sat in a circle with 11 other people, all of them looking just as uncertain as she felt. The facilitator, a woman named Morgan with kind eyes and a voice that somehow made the room feel safer, began with a question. How many of you feel like you're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop? Every hand went up. How many of you can't remember the last time your body felt truly at rest? Sarah's hands stayed up. So did 7 others. Welcome, Morgan said softly. You're in the right place. She explained something that would change everything Sarah thought she knew about why her life felt so hard. Your nervous system is the operating system running in the background of everything else. Every choice you make, every relationship you navigate, every thought you think, it's all filtered through whether your nervous system perceives you as safe or under threat. Morgan stood up and walked to a board where she drew 2 columns. Regulated, safe enough. Access to creativity, connection, clear thinking, choice, rest. Dysregulated, threat mode. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, survival strategies take over. And here's what most high-achieving, responsible, got-it-together people don't realize, Morgan continued. You've been living in threat mode for so long, you think it's normal. You think the tightness in your chest, the racing thoughts, the inability to rest, the constant urgency, you think that's just who you are. Sarah felt something crack open as Morgan spoke, just like what she had experienced in the meeting hours earlier. The light out of the darkness, she intuitively knew she was to keep following the light out of the darkness. Because it was true. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. She'd lived in all 4 states, sometimes cycling through them in a single day. The aggressive email from a colleague, fight, draft a cutting response, delete it, draft a professional one seething with subtext. The project deadline, flight, scroll social media, reorganize the desk, anything to avoid the pressure. The difficult conversation needed with her mother, freeze, go numb, can't access words or feelings, just blank. The friend who only called when they needed something, fawn, say yes, rearrange her schedule, show up exhausted and resentful. Her focus returned to Morgan. Your nervous system, Morgan continued, is not your enemy. It's trying to protect you, but most of the threats it's protecting you from aren't actually happening now. They happened years ago, or they are projections of future catastrophes that may never come. Your body is stuck in an alarm state, and that's why transformation feels impossible, because you can't access your higher capacities, clarity, creativity, intuition, choice from a threat state. This alarm state is often hard to get to the core of the trigger, as it is a multi-layered dysregulation. Common root causes are personal trauma, ancestral patterns, cultural programming, environmental toxins in food, air, and water, technological hijacking, social media and screen time, energetic interference, collective crisis, and spiritual emergence. And so much more. This is why single-cause explanations fail. It's not just your childhood or just the Matrix's influence. Surface interventions don't hold, such as affirmations and green smoothies. They just aren't enough. Deep, multidimensional work is required of the body, mind, emotion, energy, spirit, lineage, environment. Regulation capacity must be built gradually. You can't heal all layers at once. This is why we start with breath. It is the one thing that is free, and you have access to 24/7, 365 days a year. It is also the foundation for regulating your nervous system, which holds the key to all transformation. Morgan had them place one hand on their heart, one on their belly. We're going to practice something simple that speaks directly to your nervous system. It's called the extended exhale. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 4. Hold for 2. Then exhale through your mouth for a count of 8. The longer exhale activates your vagus nerve and sends a signal to your nervous system. We're safe enough to rest. You can also sigh or hum the breath out to a count of 8. To release even deeper. Sarah raised her hand. Yes, Sarah, asked Morgan. Why is the vagus nerve so important? I have not even heard of it before. What does it do for us? Great questions, replied Morgan, as the others nodded their heads in agreement. Sarah silently asked within, why wasn't anyone asking this question? It was just like at work. No one was asking the right questions. In that case, not even her. She had an aha moment that had a huge impact on her somehow. Her attention was brought back into the room as Morgan continued, Your vagus nerve is the main brake pedal of the nervous system. When it's activated, high vagal tone, it shifts you out of fight/flight and into a calmer state where your heart rate steadies, breathing deepens, digestion improves, and your brain can access clarity, intuition, and social connection. In practical terms, it's the difference between making decisions from survival versus from grounded presence. It is the key to calming a racing mind and the fear of the other shoe dropping. Morgan breathed in deeply to a count of 4, held for the count of 2, and released the breath naturally while humming 3 times to the count of 8. Just watching Morgan released the tension in the room. She was right. It did look easy, almost too easy. Could something as simple as breath really calm her nervous system? Sarah thought. Morgan invited everyone to follow her lead on the 4th breath. Sarah did the breath, then another. 10 minutes into the exercise, while halfway through an exhale, something unexpected happened. She started to cry. Not sad crying, not even relief crying. It was like her body had been holding its breath for years, and this was the first time it had permission to let go. Morgan's voice was gentle. "That's beautiful. Your body is releasing. Let it. You're safe here." The breath practice continued. 4 counts in, 2 count hold, 8 counts out. And with each exhale, Sarah felt the grip of constant vigilance loosen just slightly. Not gone. Oh God, not gone. But loose. Like a fist that had been clenched so long it didn't remember how to open, finally getting the message that it was allowed to try. By the end of the 20-minute practice, something had shifted. The room didn't look different. She didn't look different. But the quality of her presence had changed. She wasn't bracing for impact as deeply anymore. Not permanently. She'd learned that regulation wasn't a one-time fix, but for these moments, for this breath, for this window of time, her system had downshifted from red alert to something softer. "This is your baseline practice," Morgan said, "and here's why it matters. Without nervous system regulation, you cannot reliably access your inner truth. You cannot make choices from clarity. You cannot hold a consistent new frequency that matches your true desires. Your survival brain will hijack everything, your vision, your choices, and your ability to transform and convince you that this is your truth. So we start here, not because it's the sexy work, but because it's the foundation." Sarah bought the recording. She committed to 15 minutes a day, and she started to notice something she'd never seen before. How much of her life was driven by the need to manage her nervous system's constant alarm bells. The overworking wasn't ambition. It was a way to outrun the anxiety. The people-pleasing wasn't kindness. It was fawning to avoid conflict. The scrolling, the shopping, the glasses of wine, the perpetual busyness, all of it was her nervous system's default strategy to avoid feeling the thing her body had been trying to tell her for years. Something is wrong. You are living a life that is not yours. And her nervous system, in its ancient wisdom, had been sounding the alarm by compensating every time she was out of alignment with her truth. But she'd learned to call the alarm anxiety and try to medicate it, manage it, push through it. What if the anxiety wasn't the problem? What if it was truly the messenger? Morgan's words echoed. Your nervous system is trying to protect you by keeping you in familiar patterns, even painful ones, because familiar feels safer than unknown. But if you want to architect a different life, you have to first teach your body that it's safe enough to step into the unknown. 3 weeks into the daily breath practice, Sarah woke up one morning and realized the constant tightness in her chest had eased. Not disappeared. There were still hard days, triggering situations, moments when her system flooded with cortisol, and she wanted to run or fight or freeze. But now she had a tool. Now she had a way to speak to her body in a language it understood. You're safe. We can rest. We're allowed to be here. And more importantly, she understood something fundamental. You cannot transform from a threat state. No amount of vision boards or affirmations or positive thinking would work if her nervous system was screaming danger underneath it all. She had to start here, with regulations, with safety, with teaching her body that it was allowed to come down from high alert. Only then could the real work begin. It was the first step, the foundation, the prerequisite for everything that would come next. Chapter 2. When Safety Was a Lie. The deeper Sarah went into nervous system work, the more she started to see the invisible architecture of her life. The things she'd been taught were safe. The stable job, even though it was slowly killing her spirit. The mortgage, even though the house felt like a cage. The relationship with her family, friends, and significant others, even though every interaction left her feeling unseen and as though she were performing a role. That demanded constant availability, even though she gave until she had nothing left. The routine, the predictability, the rightness of living according to society's script for what a 35-year-old woman's life should look like. All of it had been sold to her as safety, but her body knew the truth. None of it was safe. Not if safety meant being able to breathe fully, to speak truthfully, to choose from her heart's true desires instead of obligation, to rest without guilt, to exist without performing. In a coaching session with a woman named Diana, a no-nonsense guide who'd walked a similar path and had the kind of presence that made lying to yourself impossible, Sarah finally said it out loud. "I don't think I've ever felt actually safe, not in my whole life." Diana didn't flinch. "Tell me what safe felt like in your body growing up." Sarah closed her eyes, searched, found it. Small, quiet, helpful, agreeable. If I could read the room and give people what they wanted before they asked, I was safe. If I achieved and made my parents proud, I was safe. If I didn't make waves, didn't ask for too much, didn't take up space, then I was safe. And how does that pattern show up now? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Everywhere. My whole life is me trying to be small and helpful enough to deserve existence. And how's that working for you? It's killing me. Diana leaned forward. Sarah, what if the very things you were taught would keep you safe are the things actively harming you? What if your nervous system is in constant alarm because you're trying to live according to someone else's definition of safety? The words landed like an earthquake. Because it was true. The job wasn't safe, it was a slow suffocation. The house wasn't safe, it was isolation wrapped in a mortgage. The relationships weren't safe. They were transactional performances where she paid with her energy to earn the right to belong. Real safety, Diana said quietly, is being able to be fully yourself and know you're still worthy of love, of rest, of existing. Real safety is having a nervous system that's regulated enough to feel your truth and choose from that place instead of from fear. Sarah felt the tears coming. I don't know how to do that. I know. That's why you're here. We're going to teach you. Remember, awareness precedes change, but awareness without action equals intellectual understanding without transformation. I want you to track each distortion you can identify and ask this. The pattern is, dan dai. The truth is, dan da. The new choice is, an daig. For example, pattern. I people please to avoid conflict. Truth. I'm safe enough to have boundaries. New choice. I will speak my truth kindly and let others have their reactions. Over the next months, Sarah learned to track her nervous system responses like a detective. She started to see the patterns. The tightness in her throat when she wanted to say no but felt she couldn't. The shallow breathing when she was in a situation that looked fine on the surface but felt wrong underneath. The exhaustion that came from a day of smiling through interactions that required her to betray herself in small ways, over and over. No signs of coherence or congruency anywhere. No wonder she felt so exhausted. The rage that showed up sideways, never at the actual source, always at herself or innocent bystanders. And slowly, carefully, with breathwork and body awareness practices as her foundation, she began making different choices, tiny ones at first, leaving a social event when her body said enough instead of staying until the socially acceptable time, saying I need to think about that instead of automatically saying yes, stopping in the middle of a conversation when she realized she was performing instead of being herself. Disconnecting from the vampire and victim friends who only knew how to take and not support. Each choice was terrifying. Each choice also proved something. She could survive people's disappointment. She could survive being seen as difficult, selfish, or not the person we thought you were. What she couldn't survive, not with her soul intact, was continuing to live in the cage she'd been told was safety. Diana, The real work, Sarah, is not to fix everything at once, but to build regulation capacity first, then clear what's ready to clear, then install new patterns from coherence, then return to baseline when dysregulation returns, because it will. We're swimming in this soup. Once Sarah felt she could regulate her nervous system, Diana took her deeper into the journey to reclaim her sovereignty through zero-point reset exercises that cleared energetic charge and thought-form interference, enabling her to reach a complete neutral space. Through grounding and connecting to the divine, both the electric of the masculine and the magnetic of the feminine, a zero-point field is naturally created in a Zen state. Sarah loved this part. Combining the zero-point field with breathwork, she could feel and truly understand what coherence felt like, even if it lasted for just a few moments. Her visions of her passions became clearer, and the next steps revealed themselves with little effort when she found herself in the Zen zone. Sarah was feeling freer by the day. She became obsessed with mastering her skills to balance her frequency. Her focus was to manifest the life she loved, and nothing was going to get in her way. Part 2, The Zero Point, Chapter 3, The Great Unraveling. It happened on a Tuesday. Sarah was in a meeting, another meeting about the meeting they'd just had, planning for a meeting they'd have next week, when she felt something inside her simply stop. Not a breakdown, not a panic attack, a cessation. Like a machine that had been running on fumes for years, it finally sputtered and went quiet. She excused herself calmly, gathered her things, and walked out of the building. She didn't quit, didn't make a scene, just left. By the time she got to her car, she was shaking. Not with fear. With something else. Something that felt like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air goes still and electric. She drove to the park, sat on a bench, took off her shoes and placed her feet deep into the grass. And for the first time in her adult life, she let herself stop, to just be. Stop performing, stop managing, stop solving, stop doing, just stopped. The thoughts came rushing in like a tidal wave. This is irresponsible. You have meetings. People are counting on you. What will Karen say? What will your boss think? You can't just leave. This is career suicide. You're going to lose everything. Who do you think you are? Sarah let the thoughts run their course, watched them like storm clouds moving across the sky. And underneath the thoughts, in the space between the panic and the guilt, she found something she'd been avoiding for over 35 years. Nothing. Not nihilistic emptiness, not depression, just neutral, uncharged, quiet presence. No story, no urgency, no role to play. It was terrifying. It was also the most honest moment of her life. Diana would later explain it to her this way. 0 point is the internal reset button. It's where you stop broadcasting the old frequency so you can consciously choose a new one. Think of it like this. Your whole life, you've been a radio station playing the same song on repeat. That song is made up of all your survival strategies, your conditioning, your adapted self. 0 point is when you finally turn off the dial to the static. It's neutral, uncharged, no signal going out. Why would my nervous system do that? Sarah had asked. Because you can't broadcast a new song while the old one is still playing. 0 point clears the channel. It's not the destination, it's the doorway. The place where the old identity gets to die so something true can be born, Diana shared, handing her a worksheet for next week. Read the description on top of the sheet, Sarah instructed Diana. When you successfully drop into 0 point, you're creating a specific neurobiological state, parasympathetic activation. The vagus nerve shifts from sympathetic, threat/activation, to parasympathetic, safety/rest. Prefrontal cortex re-engagement. Executive function comes back online. You can choose versus react. Amygdala downregulation. Threat detection center quiets. Default mode network. Quieting. The narrative self and rumination loops reduce. Heart-brain coherence. Heart rate variability shifts into organized, coherent patterns. Brainwave state shift from beta, thinking/doing, to alpha, calm awareness, and potentially theta, deep meditation. The result? Your nervous system literally has no charge running through it, no threat signal, no story hijacking your biology, pure neutral presence. Sarah nodded. She had no idea how much was going on in the brain around the nervous system. It was complicated. Sarah reflected on that day on the park bench. She didn't have the language for what was happening. She just knew that something fundamental was shifting. She sat on the park bench that day for 3 hours, breathing, letting the charge drain out of her system, feeling the layers of old identity peel away like old paint. The responsible one, the good employee, the helpful friend, the dutiful daughter, the woman who had it all together. None of it was real. It was all performance, all adaptation, all strategy for surviving in a world that had never asked what she wanted or who she actually was. This space, this 0 point, was the reset button, the place where she could finally stop reacting from old patterns and start responding from truth and from a place of expansion and spaciness. Here's what most people don't understand about transformation. You can't build a new life on top of an old identity. The old patterns, the old frequencies, the old ways of being, they'll keep pulling you back like gravity. You have to find the 0 point first, that neutral space where you're not yet the new version, but you're no longer the old one either. It's liminal. It's uncomfortable. It feels like floating in space with nothing to hold on to. But it's a necessary part of the journey to yourself, because from the 0 point, you can choose. Not from conditioning, not from fear, not from the survival strategies that got you here. From truth. By the time she drove home, something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't sure who she was anymore, and for the first time, that felt like freedom. Chapter 4. The Void Between Lives. The weeks that followed were strange. Sarah went back to work. She wasn't ready to blow up her life entirely, but she moved through it like a silent wind. Present enough to function with less effort and way more awareness. Detached enough to witness how absurd most of the game around her was. Sarah had stayed true to her breathwork practice and regularly attended Morgan's classes. Morgan encouraged her to attend one of her weekend retreats to do the deep work, the kind that cracked you open and let everything trapped inside come out. The weekend broke her through a barrier she had never been able to touch previously. It was that weekend when she breathed for 40 minutes straight, deep into the belly, then into the chest, letting the exhale fall out without forcing it. The pattern was simple, but it unlocked something in her body that words had never touched. Halfway through, she started to sob. Full body, primal sobs, not crying about anything, just releasing. Years of held grief, rage, fear, shame, all of it moving through and out. Morgan came to her side. Let the emotion move through you. Don't analyze it. Don't seek the story. Just let it release. Your body knows what to do. After lying on the mat with a blanket over her, she felt empty in the best possible way. Spacious, clean, neutral. The Morgan's voice was soft. This is the next level of 0 point, where all your elements of mind, body, soul, and energy are truly coherent, when all systems are emitting the same frequency. This is where you clear the charge so you can choose what comes next, instead of just reacting to what's always been. This exercise gives your nervous system a sense of completion and closure. Sarah floated for days after that weekend, not in a blissed-out spiritual bypass way, in a grounded, quiet, holy shit, I didn't know I could feel this calm way. She repeated the mantra that Morgan had shared. I'm safe enough right now. I'm inherently worthy to speak my truth. I can trust myself. I choose from love, not fear. She followed the protocols for her nervous system health and wellness to the T, sleep by 10 p.m. for 7 to 9 hours on a consistent schedule, no more late movie nights to drown out her anxiety. Eating healthy foods that were whole foods, that stabilized her blood sugar and kept her properly hydrated. Movement for at least 10 minutes daily. Time in nature every day and digital boundaries. No phone first/last hour of the day. And lastly, she consciously reduced her toxin exposure by drinking clean water, reducing her plastic use, and limiting EMF exposure. The 0 point wasn't a destination, it was a doorway to coherence every day, and fully stepping through the doorway meant facing everything she'd been avoiding by staying busy, staying helpful, staying safe. Sarah was seeing all her actions that were never congruent with her true self. The revelation was shocking to have so little awareness for so long about just how much she compromised her value, her heart, her truth. Life was pulling her out of coherence everywhere she looked. She felt lost again in her journey and out of sync. She felt so different, yet life kept looping her back into her old patterns. She was sharing this one day with Trudy, a woman she was naturally drawn to at Morgan's weekend intensive. They had started connecting after Morgan's regular breathwork sessions. They just vibed. Sarah didn't yet know that the universe was orchestrating Trudy's arrival in her life to assist with the next steps. Trudy, I have been where you are, Sarah. It is really difficult to do this step of your journey alone. I usually don't promote myself to friends, but I am really feeling you would benefit from coaching services with me. Trudy was a coaching angel in disguise. She didn't judge and held space as she simultaneously activated Sarah to go into her unraveling. In session one day, Trudy asked, "If you weren't living for everyone else's approval, what would you want?" Sarah's mind went blank. She'd spent so long asking, "What do they need?" and "What's expected?" and "What's the responsible choice?" that she'd never developed the muscles to ask, "What do I want?" Trudy waited. Sarah sat with the question, let it rattle around in the emptiness. And slowly, quietly, an answer began to form. I want to create. I want to facilitate. I want to help people remember who they are. I want a studio. I want mornings that feel like prayer. I want relationships where I can be real. I want a body that doesn't hurt. I want to sleep without anxiety. I want to stop performing and start living, just as she was shown in the dream. That, Trudy said gently, is your truth trying to come through. And it can't come through while you're white-knuckling a life that was never meant for you. Sarah knew what that meant. She was going to have to start taking action and let go. Let go of the job that was slowly killing her spirit. Let go of the friendships that only worked when she was the giver. Let go of toxic family dynamics where love was conditional on her playing the role they needed. To let go of the identity she'd built over the past 38 years. She was going to have to let it all die so something true could be born, and she had no idea if she was strong enough to survive that. But in the 0 point in that neutral, uncharged space, she'd caught a glimpse of something she'd been chasing her whole life without knowing it. Sovereignty. The ability to be fully herself and still be okay. More importantly, to feel safe in being fully herself. Not approved of, not celebrated, not even understood. Just, okay, just enough, just here. And that glimpse, that flash of what was possible, it was worth the unraveling. Part 3. Coherence. Chapter 5. Learning the language of alignment. Coherence, Trudy explained, was like getting every instrument in an orchestra to play in the same key. Your heart, your breath, your mind, your body, when they're all synchronized, you create a field state that's organized, usable, powerful. But when they're all broadcasting different signals... Chaos, Sarah finished. Exactly. And here's what makes this tricky. You can be regulated, your nervous system can feel safe, but still be incoherent. Regulation is the foundation. Coherence is the organization layer. Sarah thought back to the breathwork experience when she magically dropped so deep into her 0 point that coherence occurred on all levels. Her heart was set on returning to this space again and staying there. Trudy drew a diagram. Heart. What you truly want, your desire, your inner knowing. Mind, the stories, beliefs, thoughts running on repeat. Body, the sensations, the somatic memory, the truth your flesh holds. Breath, the bridge between all of them. Synchronicity. Most people live with these 4 parts completely out of sync, Trudy continued. The heart wants freedom. The mind says it's not safe. The body is bracing for rejection. And the breath is shallow because none of them trusts each other. That's internal chaos. And you cannot hold a steady frequency to the universe when your internal signal is scrambled. Sarah felt the truth of this in her bones. How many times had she wanted something, heart, then talked herself out of it, mind, then felt her body tighten with anxiety, body, then held her breath waiting for the other shoe to drop, breath. All 4 parts broadcast different signals. No wonder she was exhausted. Coherence starts simple, Trudy said. Hand on heart. Breathe in for 5 counts, out for 5 counts. But here's the key. While you breathe, you think of something that generates appreciation, real gratitude, not forced gratitude, just something that naturally softens your heart. And express gratitude for what your true vision is as if you are already living it. True gratitude is not a thought, it is a frequency. Sarah tried it. Hand on heart, 5-count breath. And she thought of her 2-year-old niece, Holly, the way she laughed, uninhibited, innocent, and free. Taking her back to her own early childhood when she would sing at the top of her lungs as she imagined playing with the fairies and elves in the backyard, the memory came flooding in. Something shifted, not dramatically, just a subtle landing, like her scattered energy was finding its way home. That's it, Trudy said. That's coherence. Your heart softened, your breath steadied, your mind quieted, and your body relaxed, all at the same time. Now imagine living from that state instead of from urgency and reaction. Before Sarah left the session, Trudy shared, "Remember, Sarah, the work is not to be endlessly healed. The work is to become the frequency that manifests your soul's vision. And that happens through nervous system regulation, 0-point resets, coherent frequency embodiment, congruent action, and returning to baseline when life knocks you off. This is the path." Somehow, that reassured Sarah that this was not a rinse-and-repeat cycle. The light shone through the darkness in that moment, once again confirming that she was on the right path. Sarah utilized her ambition to stay on track with her vision from the dream by following Trudy's instructions. She learned a lot about coherence over the next few months through the experience. It's not a one-time achievement. It's practice, a constant recalibration. Because life will knock you out of coherence. A triggering conversation, an unexpected bill, a pattern firing up from your subconscious, the collective field of fear and scarcity that permeates the culture. But coherence is the difference between staying knocked down and being able to return to the center quickly. Over the next few weeks, Sarah practiced obsessively. Morning coherence practice, midday resets when she felt herself fragmenting, evening integration before bed, and she started to notice something profound. When she was coherent, heart, breath, mind, body in sync, she could think clearly. She could feel her emotions without being overwhelmed by them. She could access intuition that had been drowned out by the noise of survival mode. When she was incoherent, even simple decisions felt impossible. Her mind would spin, her body would tighten, her heart would close, her breath would go shallow. Coherence was the key to sustainable transformation. But coherence was fragile. One triggering email could shatter it. One difficult conversation, one pattern firing up from her subconscious, pulling her back into old ways of being. That's when she started to see the real enemy wasn't her job, her family, or her circumstances. The real enemy was the distortions made up of beliefs, patterns, and obligations that made up her nervous system's survival strategies, all running underneath everything. The unconscious programs she'd been operating from. I'm only valuable if I'm useful. Love is earned through performance. My needs don't matter as much as others. I'm not safe unless I'm in control. If I'm fully myself, I'll be rejected. These beliefs, most of them installed before she was 7 years old, were like radio signals constantly interfering with her coherence. Diana called them distortion patterns. Like static on a radio, they scrambled the clean signal she was trying to broadcast. You can do the breath work all day long, Diana said. You can create beautiful moments of alignment. But if the beliefs underneath stay active, they'll pull you back into chaos every time. That's why coherence requires composing beliefs, not just witnessing them, actually releasing the power it has over your system. She could do the breath work, she could create moments of alignment, but if the beliefs underneath stayed active, they'd pull her back into chaos every time. Trudy introduced her to belief composting, a practice of identifying the belief, feeling where it lived in the body, and consciously releasing its power in the moment. Trudy had studied alchemy for years and really understood belief and pattern structures. She shared, "When you engage fully in the coherence exercise, trusting your intuition, being still, then acknowledging the belief or pattern when it shows up, is when you start reclaiming your power and then consciously choosing what is in alignment with her true heart's desires." In the following weeks, Sarah wrote down the negative beliefs as she recognized them. "I am not perfect" implies I acknowledge the story that I need to be perfect to be worthy of love, and I choose myself. "I don't know enough" implies I acknowledge the belief that my inner knowing is less valid than external authority, and I allow my wisdom to come through. "I'm not safe" implies I acknowledge the lie that I need to control everything to survive. I allow flow and synchronicity. Some are released easily, others were buried so deep they'd been woven into her identity. Like the belief that she wasn't lovable unless she was helpful, that one fought back hard, because if she let that go, who would she be? If she stopped being the one everyone could count on, would anyone choose her just for her? The question terrified her, but coherence requires it. Because you can't hold a steady signal to the universe about who you're becoming if half your system is still broadcasting who you've been taught to be. Chapter 6. The Integration. Sarah began to see her life as a series of leaks. Moments when she betrayed herself in small ways, over and over, fracturing her coherence, saying yes when she meant no. She stayed silent when she wanted to speak, dimming her energy to make others comfortable. Explaining to justify her existence, apologizing for taking up space. Each leak drained her. Each leak sent a message to her nervous system. We're not safe being real. Reintegrating meant repairing the leaks. It started with boundary practice. "No, I can't take on that project right now. I need to leave by 5 p.m. today. I don't have capacity for a phone call this week." Her hands shook every time. Her heart raced. The old belief screamed, "They'll hate you. They'll leave you. You're being selfish." But she did it anyway, and the world didn't end. Some people were disappointed. Some pulled away, proving they'd only valued what she could do for them, not who she was. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it also created space. Space for coherence to stabilize. Space for her to start asking the question that would change everything. Who am I when I'm not performing? In a quantum meditation, one of the tools Trudy had introduced Sarah to, where she dropped into deep stillness and asked to meet her innocence in that space. Her innocence that existed before the programming, before adaptations, before the survival strategies. She saw herself as a little girl, maybe 5 years old, dancing in the living room, completely unself-conscious, singing at the top of her lungs, before someone told her she was too loud, before she learned to read the room and adjust, before she made herself small to survive. That little girl looked at her adult self and asked, "When are we going to play again?" Sarah wept, because the answer was now, not in some distant future when everything was figured out, safe, and perfect. Now, in this messy, mid-unraveling, still working the job but interviewing elsewhere, still healing but finally honest life. Coherence wasn't about getting it all perfect. It was about bringing all the parts of herself into alignment, even those she viewed as broken, even those still learning, even those scared. It was about saying, "This is me, this is where I am, and I'm choosing to move forward from here." The more she practiced coherence, the more she could feel when she was in or out of alignment. A conversation that left her twisted and resentful, out of alignment. A morning spent creating in alignment. A relationship where she had to edit herself, out of alignment. A quiet evening reading with a cup of tea, in alignment. Her life was showing her, in real time, what did and didn't belong. And slowly, so slowly, it was almost imperceptible, she started to build a life that held her together, instead of constantly shattering her. She left the job, not in a blaze of glory, just quietly gave notice, finished her projects with integrity. She attracted a company with the same values. This mission resonated with her passion to assist humanity rather than seeing humanity as a means to their greed. It was one of the best freedom days of her life, and in the space created by all that release, something new started to emerge. The gap between the big vision created by her dream and where her nervous system was willing to go. Even with all the progress Sarah had made in her journey, the pure thought of having it all would shut down her nervous system. Chapter 7. The Vision That Feels Safe. Trudy met Sarah in her quiet studio room above the Apothecary Cafe, the one with the big windows and the worn wooden floor that held the echo of countless people learning how to return to themselves. Trudy didn't just help Sarah see patterns, she helped her change the relationship her body had with truth. She didn't push insight, she taught embodiments. Sarah set down her bag and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all week. "I can regulate," Sarah said. "I can get coherent. I know the steps, but when I try to envision the dream life I want, my body tightens, like my nervous system doesn't trust it, like it thinks the dream is a threat." Trudy nodded slowly, like that sentence had weight she recognized. "Because it is," she said, "not the life you want, but the change. To your nervous system, change is uncertainty, and uncertainty reads as risk. Risk reads as unsafe, especially if your history taught your body that hope leads to disappointment." Sarah felt that land in her chest. The old familiar pull doesn't want too much. Don't reach. Don't believe. Don't light up so far ahead that the fall will break you. Trudy gestured toward the mat on the floor. "Sit. We're going to teach your nervous system something it has never learned, that the future can feel safe in the body." Sarah sat cross-legged. Her shoulders were already slightly raised, as if bracing for a test she could fail. Trudy didn't start with the vision, she started with the breath. "Before we ask your subconscious to accept a new reality," Trudy said, "we create a safe container. Otherwise, the subconscious rejects the vision the same way it rejects anything unfamiliar, by tightening, doubting, procrastinating, sabotaging, or shutting down." Trudy placed one hand lightly over her own belly. "In through the nose," she said. "Slow, easy. Then extend the exhale, longer out than in." Sarah obeyed by following Trudy with the familiar breath. Her inhale was cautious at first, as the thoughts of the big vision danced across her mind. But the exhale, something softened as it lengthened. It was the oldest language her body knew, the language of downshifting. Again, in, longer out. Again. Trudy didn't rush. She watched Sarah's face, the micro-movements, the way the jaw loosened slightly when the exhale carried her out of the edge. "Remember when you extend the exhale," Trudy said, "your body receives it as a signal. Danger is not happening right now. It tells the threat system to stand down just enough for your higher mind to come back online." Sarah felt it, not as a concept, but as a subtle release, like a tight belt unclasping one notch. "Good," Trudy said. "Now we build the vision." Sarah swallowed. "I've done vision boards. I've affirmed. I've tried to see it. It never sticks." Trudy's eyes were kind but direct. Because seeing it isn't enough. The subconscious doesn't respond to words. It responds to felt experience. Your nervous system doesn't change because you think about a new life. It changes when your body experiences the new life as familiar and safe. Trudy let the room get quiet enough that Sarah could hear her own breathing. "There are two parts that must happen simultaneously," Trudy said. "Image and emotion. Not one and then the other. Together. As one unified event." Sarah nodded slowly, something in her recognizing the truth before her mind fully understood it. "If you create imagery without emotion, it stays abstract. Like a movie you watched once," Trudy continued. "If you generate emotion without imagery, your body doesn't know what it's attached to. But when you combine them, when you feel and see at the same time, you create an internal imprint." Trudy leaned forward slightly. "And that imprint tells the subconscious, this is real, and just as important, This is safe." Sarah's throat tightened at the word safe, as if her body didn't believe she was allowed to want what she wanted. Trudy noticed. "Stay with the breath," she said. "We don't force this. We invite it." She waited until Sarah's exhale lengthened again. "Now," Trudy said softly, "bring up the dream, not the whole thing. One scene, the simplest one." Sarah's eyes closed. The studio, the morning light, the coffee, the silence that wasn't loneliness. The first moment she felt her hands were finally hers again. Her chest warmed slightly. Then, immediately, the mind tried to interfere. "It's not realistic. You're behind. You're not there yet. You don't have proof." Her shoulders tensed. Trudy's voice cut through it with calm precision. "Don't argue with the thoughts. Don't fight them. Return to breath. Return to the scene. Breath first. Vision second. Emotion with it, together." Sarah did as Trudy said. In through the nose. Longer out breath. Back to the vision. And then the emotion. Not the frantic kind, "I need this to happen or I'll die." A different emotion. A quiet certainty of living it in this moment. The feeling of already belonging to that life. Her body trembled, not from fear this time, but from contact with something true. "Now add the feeling of safety," she said. "Not everything is perfect. Just safe enough. Safe enough to want it. Safe enough to receive it. Safe enough to take the next step." Sarah felt pressure behind her eyes. Tears gathered. "I don't know how to make it feel safe," she whispered. Trudy nodded. "You don't make it safe by convincing yourself," she said. "You make it safe by pairing the vision with regulation. Every time you return to the vision from a regulated state, you teach your nervous system a new association. Future equals safe enough." Trudy guided her further. "Now invite the fear to show itself in your body. Where are you feeling the fear, Sarah?" "In my chest." "Great. Close your eyes, place your hand on your chest, and bring your breath deep into your abdomen, then up into your chest, and just be with your fear. Be really present with the fear." Sarah took a deep breath, held for a moment, and then let out a long, audible sigh, and the tension in her body released just slightly. Trudy continued, "What is the fear feeling? What is it afraid that could happen that would not be safe? Allow the breath and be present with it. It just wants to be heard." Sarah shifted her weight uncomfortably, took another deep breath, brought her full focus into the fear, and listened. "It is afraid of not being deserving of the dream." Trudy responded, "Good. The fear is opening to you. Breathe again and ask fear what would happen if you did find the home with a studio." Sarah sighed and went deeper. "It is very confusing as it can't connect the dots. It is not finding the purpose. Where is the safety in moving to an unknown place when I am already in a place that satisfies it? Even though I am very unhappy there," Sarah added. Trudy asked, "Fear? What are you in fear of losing in this change?" Sarah took another deep breath. "I'm afraid the dream will disappoint. And leaving what is secure again, it can't make sense of it. It really believes it is already living the dream of the social status of the home I have." Trudy. Fear what would bridge between Sarah's dream and what feels secure? Sarah went deeper into her chest to hear the fear and sent it love and understanding, wrapping it in light from the darkness, and was present with the fear. As she breathed the light into the darkness, the fear began to release and expand, accepting the love and understanding. Sarah held the fear as it slowly dissipated, leaving a rainbow bridge in its place. "It is gone. It has gone with the light out of the darkness and left me a rainbow bridge. This is the bridge for me to walk in the journey to finding my home in the dream," shared Sarah. That was beautiful to journey through. I had no idea all fear wanted was to be heard and loved, so it could be free to move on. Trudy continued, building the lesson like a map. "Great work, Sarah. That was truly magical to witness. Now bring your focus back to your nervous system. Ask the question your nervous system can say yes to," she said. Sarah's mind reached for something big. Quit the job, move, change everything. Trudy shook her head gently, as if she'd heard the thoughts before they formed. "Not the big leap," she said. "The next best step, no matter how small. Remember, your subconscious trusts small." Sarah kept her eyes closed. Breathe in, long out. Back to the studio scene. The feeling, warm, steady, real. And then the question came from somewhere deeper than thinking. What's the next best step, no matter how small? The answer arrived with a simplicity that felt almost embarrassing. 10 minutes, Sarah said, surprised. 10 minutes in the morning, no phone, no rushing, just coffee and quiet, like in the dream. Trudy smiled, like that was exactly what she was waiting for. "There," she said. "That's how you anchor the vision, not by demanding the whole future arrive at once, but by living one small piece of it now in a way your nervous system can accept." Sarah opened her eyes. The room looked the same, but she felt different inside it, like she'd been brought into alignment with something she could finally trust. Trudy's voice softened. "Here's the sequence," she said, "the pattern that rewires you. First, breathwork creates the safe container. It tells your body you can relax enough to imagine. Second, visualization plants the new pattern. The image is the blueprint. Third, emotion makes it real. Feeling is the language of the subconscious. Fourth, embrace and love the fear. Fifth, repetition makes it familiar. Familiar becomes safe. And sixth, once your nervous system stops rejecting the vision, congruence becomes natural. You don't force authenticity. Your actions begin to match what you know because internal conflict dissolves. Sarah felt the truth of that in her bones. She remembered how, in the old life, even wanting something better from within, not from the external world, would trigger guilt, fear, and self-correction. The desire would rise and the system would shut it down. But now the desire could rise inside a regulated body. And that changed everything. Most people visualize while dysregulated, Trudy said, and then they wonder why it doesn't work. The body says, unsafe. The subconscious says, untrue. The universe delivers the frequency that is sent out. She looked at Sarah steadily. You're not failing. Your system is protecting you. Our job is to teach them that the life you want isn't dangerous. Sarah swallowed. And if I can do that, Trudy's voice softened, then you become the woman who can hold it. A silence passed between them, one of those silences that wasn't empty, but full. Sarah placed a hand over her heart, feeling the slow steadiness there. It wasn't a breakthrough like lightning, it was a recalibration, a new agreement inside her, a new imprint. The dream wasn't just something she wanted, it was something her body could now begin to trust. Breath by breath, image and emotion together, small next steps that made the future familiar, and with that, without forcing anything, Sarah felt something click into place. Authenticity wasn't a performance. It was what happened when the inside finally became safe enough to match the outside. The next morning, Sarah woke before her alarm. Not wide awake, more like her nervous system had stirred first, scanning the day ahead like it was a room she needed to walk into cautiously. Her phone sat on the nightstand with its dark screen, a simple rectangle that could deliver 100 tiny disruptions in under 10 seconds. Her hand hovered toward it almost automatically. Then she heard Trudy's voice, calm and unwavering. Your subconscious trusts small. The next best step, no matter how small. Sarah let her hand drop back onto the blanket. She sat up slowly and walked into the kitchen as if she were trying not to startle something inside herself. The house was quiet. The air felt clean, almost holy in the way early morning sometimes does, before the world's noise begins insisting on your attention. She poured coffee. The sound was gentle. The scent rose like permission. And there it was, the moment. 10 minutes. No phone, no rushing, just coffee and quiet. She sat at the table and felt the urge to be productive instantly flare. You should make a list. You should knock something out. You're behind. Her shoulders crept upward. Her jaw tightened. The familiar pressure arrived in her chest, like a hand closing around a small bright flame before it could grow. This is silly, the mind whispered. 10 minutes won't change anything. You're playing pretend. Sarah almost laughed at how quickly the old programs arrived, how they didn't even knock first, they just entered. She stared at her coffee and noticed her breathing had gone shallow. Trudy's other instruction returned. Breath first, vision second, emotion with it, together in gratitude. Sarah placed one hand lightly on her lower belly. In through the nose, slow, and then the exhale, longer out than in. She didn't try to fix her thoughts. She didn't negotiate with them. She simply gave her body a new signal. Again. Breathe in, longer out. Again. Something shifted, not dramatic, but real. The tightness loosened one notch. The room softened around the edges. The world wasn't asking for proof. It was only asking her to be here. She closed her eyes. Trudy had said, one vision, the simplest one. Sarah brought up the studio in her mind, not a full fantasy, not a highlight reel. Just a moment. Morning light slanting across wood floors. Her mug was resting on a table. Silence that wasn't loneliness. Her body tried to tighten again, as if the vision itself was too exposed. Don't get excited, the mind warned. Don't reach. Don't trust this. You'll feel foolish when it doesn't happen. Sarah's throat tightened. Her shoulders rose. And then, almost like a quiet rebellion, she lengthened the exhale again. Longer out than in. She returned to the studio scene. But this time, she did what Trudy had emphasized, not just the image, the feeling. She let the emotion arrive, not the frantic kind, not the desperate kind, a steadier emotion, the feeling of already belonging to that life, not forcing it, not demanding it, just letting it be present the way warmth is present when you stand in sunlight. Her chest warmed. Her breath deepened on its own, and then she added the piece Trudy had named directly. Safe enough? Not perfect, not guaranteed, just safe enough. Safe enough to want it, safe enough to receive it, safe enough to take the next step. Sarah's eyes prickled. A tear slid down her cheek, surprising her with how quiet it was. No sobbing, no drama, just release, as if her nervous system had been waiting years for someone to tell it the truth. Her heart's desire doesn't equal danger. Her mind tried one last time. You're being naive. Sarah didn't argue. She exhaled longer. Then she asked the question Trudy had given her, the question that made the future practical, not overwhelming. What's the next best step? No matter how small. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the answer arrived with a simplicity that felt almost embarrassing. Protect these 10 minutes, not once. Daily, as if her future was built less by intensity and more by devotion. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at her coffee again. The kitchen was the same. The day ahead was still waiting, but something in her had changed position. The old urgency was still present, but it wasn't driving. It was sitting in the back seat. She felt her shoulders lower, her jaw softened. The impulse to grab her phone loosened its grip. And in that quiet, without making a proclamation, without trying to be authentic, Sarah noticed something subtle. Her inner world and her outer world were matching. Not because she forced congruence, but because for the first time in a long time, her nervous system didn't need to protect her from her own dream. She took one slow sip of coffee, then another, and in the simplest way possible, she kept her promise to herself. 10 minutes. Safe, real, familiar enough to hold. She didn't feel like she was pretending anymore. She felt like she was practicing what she already knew was true. A month later, Sarah was now in flow with her morning 10 minutes. She paused and asked what the very next step is. Sarah gasped. She knew it was coming, and as painful as it was, she stayed in the home that felt like someone else's museum. The thought of preparing it for sale and finding a new home felt suddenly daunting, and she knew it was the next right step, and breathed. She had been commuting for an hour each way to get to her new workplace. She really loved the new environment, and one reason was that it was located outside the city's hustle and bustle, where there were homes with real gardens and lawns, not just concrete. As she sat through the apprehension of the potential move, she breathed. Sarah could feel that it was all going to work out brilliantly. The excitement built, and she reached for her phone to message Trudy. She was not going to believe this. Part 4, Frequency and Congruence. Chapter 8, The Signal You Broadcast. At 42, 7 years into the journey, Sarah was unrecognizable from the woman who'd sat in that first breathwork class. Trudy had explained it this way. Frequency is the dominant emotional, mental, energetic signal you're broadcasting into your life. Think of yourself as a radio tower. Whatever frequency you're transmitting most consistently is what the universe tunes into and matches. So it's like the law of attraction? Sarah had asked. Sort of, but most people get this wrong. They think you can broadcast "I'm not worthy" and "I'm not enough" and "I'm scared" at the subconscious level, then slap some affirmations on top and expect the universe to respond to the affirmations. It doesn't work that way. Trudy drew another diagram. Conscious mind. I am abundant. Subconscious programs. I'm not enough. I don't deserve. I'm unsafe. Nervous system state. Threat/survival mode. Actual frequency being broadcast, not enough plus unsafe. The universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your frequency. And your frequency is determined by your nervous system state, your coherence level, and the beliefs running underneath. This is why people can affirm themselves blue in the face and nothing changes. They're trying to broadcast a new frequency from an old operating system. Sarah felt this truth land in her body. All those years of vision boards and affirmations and positive thinking, they'd never worked, because underneath it all, her frequency was still broadcasting. I'm not safe. I'm not enough. I have to perform to deserve love. So how do you change your frequency? Sarah asked. You do what you've been doing. Regulate your nervous system so you're not stuck in threat mode. Find the 0 point to clear the old signal. Build coherence so all your parts are synchronized. And then you can consciously choose and stabilize a new frequency. Frequency wasn't a peak state. That's what Sarah learned the hard way. She could have an amazing breakthrough in breathwork or meditation, feel expanded and clear and connected, and then 2 days later be right back in anxiety and scarcity thinking. That was a peak state, temporary, unsustainable. What Trudy called regulated frequency was different. It was the ability to maintain a chosen state under pressure and return to baseline quickly after triggers. For Sarah, that frequency felt like grounded peace meets creative aliveness, calm but not flat, present but not passive, open but with stated boundaries, clear but not rigid. It took conscious effort to maintain, because the world was loud. The news cycle pulled her toward anxiety, social media for comparison, family dynamics toward old patterns, the collective field toward fear and scarcity. This is what Sarah discovered about frequency. You don't just set it once and forget it. You have to condition, hold it like training a muscle. Daily practices that reinforced the frequency. Morning coherence meditation. Breathwork detox once a week to clear accumulated charge. 0 point resets whenever she felt the old frequency creeping back in. Moment-by-moment awareness of what she was actually broadcasting, and the most powerful tool of all, congruence checks. After every conversation, every decision, every choice, she'd check in with her body. Does this feel clean? Or is there an aftertaste? Clean equals congruent, in alignment with truth, broadcasting her actual frequency. Aftertaste equals incongruent. Somewhere she betrayed herself, even subtly, which meant her frequency was scrambled. After every conversation, every decision, every choice, she'd check in with her body. Does this feel clean? Or is there an aftertaste? Congruence, Trudy taught her, was the integrity layer that made everything else sustainable. You can be calm and coherent while people-pleasing, Trudy said. You can have a steady frequency while still living someone else's life. Congruence is different. It's the inside matching the outside. She drew one final diagram. Inside. What you know is true for you. Congruence gap. Outside. What you say, choose, and do. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you dim your light to make others comfortable, every time you over-explain your existence or edit yourself to be palatable, you create a congruence gap. And that gap leaks your energy and scrambles your frequency. Sarah saw it immediately. The leaks were everywhere, saying I'm fine when she wasn't, agreeing to plans she didn't want to attend. She stayed silent when she wanted to speak, performing enthusiasm she didn't feel, apologizing for taking up space. Each leak sent a message to her nervous system, we're not safe being real. Each leak scrambled her frequency. I say one thing, but do another, so which am I actually broadcasting? Congruence is simple to understand but hard to practice, Trudy said, because it will cost you according to your ego identity. Some people will be disappointed, some will pull away when you stop performing. Some will accuse you of changing or being selfish, and you have to be willing to let them go rather than betray yourself one more time. Over the next year, Sarah learned to track congruence like a detective. After speaking or acting, she'd pause and check. How does my body feel right now? If she felt clean, clear, grounded, at peace, she was congruent. If she felt twisted, guilty, resentful, or that weird sense of something's off, she'd created a congruence gap. The leaks became obvious. Over-explaining after setting a boundary leads to aftertaste. The boundary was fine. The apology for having one was the leak. Saying something true and standing in it without apologizing leads to clean. Making a choice from should to aftertaste. Making a choice from genuine desire to clean. Agreeing to help when she was already depleted to aftertaste. Saying, I don't have capacity for that right now implies clean, terrifying but clean. This is where most people sabotage their transformation, Trudy told her. They do all the inner work. They regulate their nervous system, they clear their patterns, they get coherent, they find their frequency, and then they leak it all away by continuing to betray themselves in their daily choices. They are not able to stand in their power. There is still a structure in place that they are not seeing. They still want to make the world happy by guessing what it expects of them. Congruence was the final piece, because here's the truth. The universe responds to frequency. And you can't hold a clear, steady frequency if you're constantly creating internal conflict by saying one thing and doing another. Your nervous system knows when you're lying, even polite, socially acceptable lying. Your body knows when you're performing instead of being real, and that incongruence scrambles the signal. Which is why all the vision boards and affirmations in the world won't work if you're still living incongruently. The universe doesn't respond to what you say you want. It responds to the frequency you're actually broadcasting, and if your frequency is scrambled by incongruence, split between who you are inside and who you're pretending to be outside, the universe gets mixed signals and sends you mixed results. Congruence wasn't just about integrity or being honest, it was about becoming a clear channel, so the universe could actually hear what you were calling in. As they say in alchemy, focus creates your reality, beliefs create your reality, and what you think you are focused on is not what you are focused on. Congruence was the integrity-authenticity layer, the thing that made coherence sustainable. Just because she could be calm within her nervous system while still people-pleasing, she could lie to herself that she was living in a coherent, steady frequency while still living someone else's life. But congruence demanded truth. What you know inside has to match what you say, choose, and do outside. No more split between the public and private selves. No more performance, just, this is me, take it or leave it. And here's what she learned. The universe responds to congruence. When you're broadcasting a steady, coherent, congruent frequency, when your inside matches your outside and you're no longer leaking energy through lies, performance, and self-betrayal, new aligned opportunities appear. Not because you're manifesting from wishful thinking, but because you've become a clear channel, and clarity attracts what's meant for you while naturally repelling what isn't. Applying the principles of congruency made Sarah's move seamless. The realtor who was in alignment showed up when she was holding a steady signal. They were able to help with selling and buying her new home, including matching Sarah with a great lender to secure her new home as soon as she found it, making the transition so much easier for her. Word had gotten out at her new job that she was looking for something cozy and quaint closer to the office. Sarah had been visualizing a cozy, homey feeling, and when it became clear, she started sharing her vision with everyone. When Joe, one of the office mates, heard about Sarah's dream home, he immediately thought of a home that was soon to come to market and felt was a perfect match. Quaint, and it had a studio, which he didn't even know was part of Sarah's dream. Joe helped coordinate the realtors to make arrangements for Sarah to see the home as soon as it was ready. She couldn't stand it. The pictures Joe had brought to work brought tears to her eyes. The day had come for her to see it for the first time, passing the historic homes on her street until she walked up to the home, her home. She recognized the white picket fence, the beautiful gardens, the open porch with the stained glass entrance door into the home. It was pure magic. She felt like the little girl playing with the fairies and elves once again. As she walked through the front gate and approached the house, she could hear them whispering, "Come and play." Tears rolled down her face, unnoticed by her realtor. She truly felt she was home, and she hadn't even walked into the front door yet. Gratitude sprang up from every pore of her being. The house was the perfect image of the one in her dream, with wispy, sheer curtains at the kitchen window that looked out over the back garden areas to the east. Her studio was set in the gardens like a hobbit home. Nature oozed everywhere. It was truly a gem in the outskirts of suburbia. The external shifts were obvious, but the internal shift was the real miracle. She was attracting her vision faster now. She'd found her frequency. The creative projects that called to her were the ones that made her soul sing, not the ones that looked impressive on paper. She was living in frequency, and the frequency was hers, not borrowed, not inherited, not performed. Hers. Chapter 9. The Battle to Hold It. But the path wasn't linear. There were days, weeks, sometimes, when the old patterns roared back with a vengeance. A family gathering where she reverted to the helpful, agreeable daughter within 5 minutes. A project that triggered her perfectionism, and she worked herself into exhaustion trying to prove her worth. A conflict that made her want to disappear into a freeze response rather than speak her truth. The first time it happened, Sarah panicked. "I've lost it. I'm back where I started. All that work for nothing." But Trudy reminded her, frequency regulation isn't about never getting triggered. It's about how fast you return to baseline, and each time you practice returning, the pathway gets stronger. So Sarah learned to track the drift. Notice when she was pulled out of coherence. Pause. Breathe. Ask, what belief just got activated? What am I trying to protect by going back to the old pattern? Usually, it was fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being too much or not enough. Fear of standing alone. Fear of the unknown. The old survival strategies had kept her safe in childhood. They'd helped her navigate a world where being herself wasn't allowed. But now, they were prison walls. Every time she chose coherence over comfort, truth over performance, alignment over approval, she was breaking down those walls. Some days she wanted to quit, to go back to the safe suffering of the old life. At least she knew how to navigate that. But then she'd remember the dream, the life where she woke up free, where her hands created, where she gathered with women who saw her, where coffee was ceremony and mornings were spacious. She was so close. That life was real. It was the life that pulled her forward, and she was building it, breath by breath, choice by choice, day by day. By 43, she was teaching what she'd learned, running programs for women in the liminal space, the ones who felt the call to something more but didn't know how to begin. The coaching clients who showed up were the right ones, not the ones who wanted her to fix them or who saw her as a savior, but the ones who were ready to do their own work and just needed a guide. By 45, she was writing her first book, not about having it all together, but about the messy, holy process of coming home to yourself. She was known in her community as a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged sovereign, not perfect, not polished, but real. And today... Part 5. The Return. Chapter 10. The Life She Architected. Sarah is teaching what she'd learned, running programs for women in the liminal space, the ones who felt the call to something more but didn't know how to begin. And now, she stood in her kitchen, gazing at the actual studio from the dream, preparing to facilitate the women's circle that had started a year ago, prompted by Trudy. It had become the heartbeat of her work. The phone sat on the counter, silent by choice. No one owned her time anymore. No one could. She made coffee slowly, feeling each step, the rhythm of grinding beans, the bloom of hot water meeting grounds. The first sip was prayer, was homecoming, was the kind of simple pleasure that survival mode had taught her to rush past, but freedom had taught her to savor. Sarah walked to the window, coffee in hand, and watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of rose and amber. And then she felt it, the tremor of recognition. This moment. I've lived this moment before, not in this lifetime, in the dream, the one that had come to her 10 years ago when she was drowning in a life that wasn't hers. The dream had shown her this morning, this studio, this coffee, this freedom, this peace. She'd thought it was fantasy then, a cruel glimpse of something she could never have. But it hadn't been a fantasy. It had been a message from her future self, a guardian, a guidepost showing her what was possible if she was willing to do the work. And she had done the work, 10 years of it. The regulation practices, the 0-point resets, the coherence training, the frequency stabilization, the congruence work, the sovereignty claim. All of it had led here, to this moment where the dream and reality finally merged. She hadn't magically transformed overnight. She hadn't bypassed the process or skipped the hard parts. She had walked the path, step by sacred step, breath by breath, choice by choice. And now, standing in her studio at 45, she was finally living the life the dream had shown her. Not because time had bent or reality had shifted, but because she had transformed. From the inside out, from survival into creation, from performance into presence, from the woman she'd been told to be into the woman she truly was. The dream had been real all along. It had just been waiting for her to become the woman who could live it. Chapter 11. Completing the story. Sarah sat at her desk and looked down at the manuscript she'd been writing for the past year. The story of her journey, from the dream at 35 to the life she was living now at 45. She'd started with the dream itself, because that's where it had all begun, not with a plan or a strategy, but with a vision that had shattered her complacency and shown her what was possible. Then she'd documented the reality she'd been living when the dream came, the suffocation, the performance, the slow death of living someone else's life, and then, page by page, chapter by chapter, she'd told the truth about what it took to bridge the gap between who she'd been and who she'd become. The nervous system work that had felt so basic was actually foundational, the 0-point practices that had cracked her open and let everything trapped inside come out. The coherence training had taught her to synchronize her heart, breath, mind, and body. The frequency stabilization had helped her maintain her signal even when life got messy. The congruence work that had demanded she stop betraying herself in small ways, over and over. The authentic Sarah could now truly be seen. And finally, the sovereignty, the hard-won, earned through practice, ability to be fully herself and know she was still worthy of love, of rest, of existing. It had taken 10 years. Not because she was slow, not because she was broken, but because real transformation, the kind that rewires your nervous system, releases generational patterns, and restructures your relationship with reality itself, takes time. It takes devotion. It takes practice. It takes discipline to allow your vision to pull you forward. It takes falling down and getting back up. It takes choosing truth over comfort again and again and again. And she'd done it. Sarah picked up her pen and wrote the final words of the manuscript. You too can be the architect of freedom in your life. Sarah closed her manuscript and smiled. The women would be arriving soon. She'd share pieces of this story with them as a fellow traveler who'd walked the path and was still walking it. Because that's what freedom architects do. They don't build your life for you. They walk beside you as you learn to build it yourself, your way. Sarah set down her pen and looked at the completed manuscript. The story was done. But the life? The life was just beginning, because that's the thing about freedom. It's not a destination you arrive at, and then you're done. It's a practice, a devotion, a daily choice to keep choosing truth, keep choosing alignment, keep choosing yourself. The dream from 10 years ago hadn't been a prediction. It had been an invitation, and she'd said yes, not all at once, not perfectly, but consistently, devotedly, over and over for a decade. And now, standing in the life she'd architected, she understood something profound. The dream had been real the entire time. It was her soul, reaching forward through time to show her the frequency she was capable of holding. It was her future self, acting as guardian and guide, whispering, "This is possible, but you have to do the work. You have to show up for you." And she had. She'd done the work that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. She'd let the old self die. She'd walked through the fire of transformation. She'd claimed her sovereignty inch by hard-won inch. And the reward wasn't perfection, arrival, or some final achievement. The reward was this morning, this coffee, this studio, this circle of women is arriving in an hour, this quiet, spacious, fully inhabited life, this freedom. Sarah gathered her manuscript, the story of her journey from dream to reality. Tomorrow she'd begin editing it into a book, not for fame or validation, but because somewhere out there, a 35-year-old woman was about to have a dream that would shatter her complacency and show her what's possible, and she'd need to know the dream is real, the path is real, the work is real, and on the other side of that work, 10 years or 30 years or however long it takes, freedom is waiting, not as a fantasy, not as a someday maybe, but as the most natural, grounded, lived reality, as the life you were always meant to architect, your life, your frequency, your sovereignty, yours. The Architect. Blueprint. Step 1. Regulate the nervous system. You cannot transform from a state of constant threat. First, you must learn to speak to your body in the language of safety. Breathwork, grounding, long exhales, creating space between stimulus and response. The world will tell you that anxiety is the problem. It's not. It's the messenger. Listen to it. It's trying to tell you something is wrong. And something is wrong. You're living a life that isn't yours. Step 2. Find 0 point. This is the reset, the place where you stop broadcasting the old frequency and consciously choose a new one. 0 point is neutral, uncharged. Scary as hell if you've been using busyness and performance to avoid feeling. But it's the doorway. You have to let the old identity die here, the helpful one, the perfect one, the one everyone else needs you to be. You have to stop, and in the stopping, discover who you are when you're not performing. Step 3. Build coherence. This is where you learn to synchronize heart, breath, mind, and body. When you're coherent, you can think clearly, feel without overwhelm, access your deepest intuition, make choices from truth instead of fear. But coherence is fragile. Beliefs will shatter it. Patterns will pull you back into chaos, so you have to compost the beliefs, acknowledge and release the power of your stories, identify the leaks every time you betray yourself and repair them. This is integration work. It's not glamorous. It's not a weekend workshop. It's daily practice, over and over, until alignment becomes your baseline. Step 4. Stabilize your frequency. Frequency is the signal you broadcast, and whatever frequency you hold most consistently, the universe matches. If you're broadcasting, "I'm not enough," even while saying affirmations about abundance, guess which signal the universe responds to? Regulated frequency means you can maintain your chosen state under pressure. You can return to baseline quickly after triggers. This requires the foundation of regulation, 0 point, and coherence. And it requires practice. daily calibration, weekly detox sessions, moment-by-moment awareness of when you're drifting out of frequency and consciously choosing to return. Step 5. Live in congruence. This is the integrity layer. What you know inside must match what you say, choose, and do outside. No more split between public and private self. No more saying yes when you mean no. No more dimming your light to make others comfortable. No more over-explaining your existence. Congruence is clean. After a congruent choice, you feel clear. After an incongruent choice, there's an aftertaste of guilt, resentment, that twisted feeling in your gut. Learn to track that. Let it guide you back to the truth. Step 6. Claim your sovereignty. This is the culmination. Sovereignty means you are the author of your life, not a victim, not a reactor, not a performer trying to earn love, the creator. You recognize the patterns and beliefs that aren't yours and release them. You feel what safety really is, not what you were prescribed, but what your body knows is true. You stop waiting for permission and start giving yourself what you've been begging others to provide: validation, rest, space to be real. And when you do this work, when you regulate your nervous system, find 0 point, build coherence, stabilize your frequency, and live in congruence, the universe responds. Not always overnight, not always in the way you expect, but it responds, because you've become a clear signal. And clarity is magnetic. Epilogue. The invitation. If you're reading this, you're standing at the threshold. Maybe you've had the dream too, the glimpse of a life beyond survival, beyond performance, beyond the roles you've been playing for so long, you forgot they weren't you. Or maybe you haven't had the dream yet, but you feel the whisper, the knowing that there's more. That this life you're living, even if it looks successful from the outside, isn't actually yours. Here's what I want you to understand. The dream is real. It's not fantasy. It's not wishful thinking. It's not a cruel glimpse of something you can never have. It's a message from your future self, a frequency beacon, a guardian showing you what's possible if you're willing to do the work. And the work? It's this: the soul truth you need to hear. Here's what Sarah knew after 10 years of walking her path. If you're willing to do the work, the deep, unsexy, daily work of learning to be fully yourself, the universe will meet you. Not maybe, not if you're lucky, it will meet you. Because that's how the universe works. It responds to frequency, and when your frequency is clear, coherent, and congruent with who you truly are, reality reorganizes itself to match. Not through magic, through physics. Your internal state encodes your external reality. Always has. Always will. The question your soul is asking. So the question isn't whether the dream is possible. The question isn't whether you're ready enough, healed enough, or worthy enough. The question your soul is asking right now, the one that brought you to this story, is this: are you willing? Willing to stop performing and start living? Willing to release the life you've been told to want and claim the one your soul has been calling you toward? Willing to do the work, not for a weekend, but as a devoted practice? Willing to love the fear and hold your vision present as if you already were living it? Willing to let the old self die so the true one can be born? Willing to stand in your sovereignty, even when it costs you approval? Willing to become the kind of person who can hold the life you've been dreaming of? What your body already knows. Your body already knows the answer. Right now, as you read these words, your nervous system is either opening, yes, this is for me, or closing, not yet, not now. Trust that. If your body just said yes, even a trembling, uncertain yes, then welcome. Welcome to the threshold. Welcome to the work. Welcome to the life you're about to architect. The dream is waiting, but more importantly, your soul is waiting. The sovereign, free, fully inhabited version of you. The one who knows that the dream was never about escaping reality. It was about becoming the person who could live it. What happens next? If you're ready to begin, we walk beside you, not as gurus with all the answers, but as guides who've walked this path and know the terrain. We'll teach you the practices, the breath work, the zero-point resets, the coherence training, the frequency stabilization, the congruence work. We'll hold space while you do the hard, holy work of becoming you. We'll remind you when you forget that the dream is real and that you're exactly where you need to be. And we'll celebrate with you when you step into the life you architected, the life that was always yours, the life the dream showed you was possible. This is where your journey begins. Not someday, not when you're more ready, not when conditions are perfect. Now, with the body you have, the life you're living, the messy, beautiful, perfect, imperfect place you're standing right now. The threshold is waiting, the work is real, the freedom is possible, and your soul already knows the answer. A note from the author. This story is fictional, but the path is real. Sarah's journey is a composite, drawn from my own transformation and the women I've walked beside over the past decades. The dream, the corporate suffocation, the nervous system dysregulation, the zero-point unraveling, the coherence practice, the frequency stabilization, the congruence work, the sovereignty claiming, all of it is real. Every practice mentioned, breathwork, belief composting, congruence checks, zero-point resets, these are the foundational tools of quantum alchemy fusion, quantum breathwork fusion. And they work, not because they're mystical or magical, though they can certainly feel that way, but because they address the root of why most people stay stuck. They're trying to build a new life from an old frequency. You cannot architect a life of freedom while operating in survival mode. You cannot call in aligned opportunities while broadcasting, "I'm not enough." You cannot create a coherent reality while your internal signals are in chaos. The work is simple, but it's not easy. It requires you to stop, to feel, to witness, to release, to choose again. It requires you to question everything you've been taught about who you should be and dare to discover who you actually are. It requires you to become the kind of person who can hold the life you've been dreaming of. And that's exactly what we'll teach you in our programs. Not theory, not philosophy, not more information to add to the pile. The actual practices, the real tools, the step-by-step path. From regulation to sovereignty, from survival to creation, from the life you've been living to the life you're meant to architect. The dream is real, the path is real, the freedom is real, and we'll walk beside you every step of the way. The threshold is waiting. Will you cross it? You can find out more about our current programs at https://quantumalchemyfusion.com. About the author. Julie Valentin is the visionary behind Quantum Alchemy Fusion, where ancient alchemical wisdom meets the quantum field to support real embodied transformation. A guide for leaders, seekers, and creators at a threshold moment, Julie helps people stabilize the nervous system, dissolve hidden patterning, and return to the inner clarity that makes aligned creation possible. She is also the author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, Soul on Fire. In Architect a Life of Freedom, Julie invites you into the deeper truth of creatorhood. To become a true creator, we step outside culturally formed boxes and into who we truly are. That shift happens by releasing unseen, unconscious behaviors driven by inner belief structures, reconnecting deeply within, and learning to create from the quiet certainty of inner knowing, hidden beneath old programs and inherited conditioning. This book is a pathway out of living by default and into freedom built from the inside out. My deepest thanks to my technology-savvy husband and fellow author Tim Fraser for the steady support behind the scenes, helping bring this book to life on Amazon and in audiobook format.